Welcome, everyone from around the world. My name is Felipe, and I'm here with the Charter for Compassion. I have the pleasure of moderating this beautiful panel of movements of compassion through civil disobedience that has been put on by the Compassionate Youth Leaders Dialogue Series and the youth group here in the Charter for Compassion. So I have with me Maya, Monya, Celine, Laith, and Tahil, who I would love for each one of you to introduce yourselves, and then we can get into this conversation going. So why don't we start with Maya?
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Maya. I am an Indian American who is currently based in Rome, Italy, as part of the Global Governance Program. And I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, Maya. Monya?
Hi, everyone. My name is Monya Attari, and I'm a part of the European Arab Student Union. I go to university in Spain, and I'm a second-year law student.
Thank you. Celine?
Celine. So I was born in Egypt, but now I study in London, and I'm also part of the ESU, the European Arab Student Union. And I study engineering.
Thank you, Celine. Laith, and then Tahil.
My name is Laith. I am a Palestinian Jordanian student in Spain, and I'm also part of the European Arab Student Union.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tahil Sharma. I am an Indian American born and raised in Los Angeles, and I am the regional coordinator for North America at the United Religions Initiative.
Thank you so much, all of you, for introducing yourself. I want to clarify and make sure that people know in this webinar that we're having young voices from around the world talking about a very, very much connecting topic, which is compassion and movements of compassion through civil disobedience. And I would like to start this conversation by bringing a definition of civil disobedience, because so many times we hear the term civil disobedience as like, oh, illegal, scary. Maybe we don't want to deal with that, right? And so just looking through the Britannica, it says, civil disobedience is the refusal to obey the demands or commands of a government or occupying power without resorting to violence or active measures of opposition. Its usual purpose is to force concessions from the government or occupying power. Civil disobedience has been a major tactic and philosophy of nationalist movements in Africa and India, in the American civil rights movement, and of labor, anti-war, and other social movements in many countries. This is it's a symbolic, ritualistic violation of the law rather than a rejection of the system as a whole. The civil disobedient finding legitimate avenues of change blocked or non-existent feels obligated by a higher, extra-legal principle to break some specific law. And so with that, I would like to open the conversation with, I guess, putting the first question out. First of all, I would like to know, where have you been participating in civil disobedience? And, you know, we don't need to go in order, but, you know, all of you guys, if you can just like chime in, what is an example of you that you have participated in a civil disobedient act?
Happy to start. So for me, I live in London. London's really fortunate in the sense that since October, we've been having nationwide movements movements of civil disobedience almost every 2 weeks. So I've been involved in quite a few of those. And as of recently, my university has also started doing its own encampments, which have been really, really great to be a part of. So.
Perfect. So you have been participating in response to the genocide that we were observing in Gaza, correct?
100%. Yeah.
And for the rest of you, can you please tell me your experience? Where have you been participating on protests or any sort of civil disobedience?
Similar to Celine, I live in Spain, and well, yeah, that's where I go to university. And in response to what's been happening in Gaza, I've participated in protests in the city where I live in. And yeah, I mean, it's great to see because I personally did not expect this much solidarity from like the people in the city. So it was really nice to see. And yeah.
That's amazing. Maya, Laith, Tahil?
Yes, I was raised in between India and the US. And when after COVID 2020, I stayed permanently in the US for that period of time, I was part of organizing protests for rallies for solidarity with Asian Americans, especially in the time of all the hate speech in COVID, and against gun violence, which, as we know, is a big issue in the United States, especially for adolescents.
Absolutely. Laith, Tahil?
Oh, I unmuted myself. Oops. I have been involved in demonstrations and civil disobedience protests since 2014. It's been on topics related to preventing genocide, especially in the case of Gaza right now, to the separation of families at the US-Mexico border, to pushing back against much of the work that's been happening against racial minorities here in the United States, and a variety of other topics that have lightly touched or grazed the US because of international incidents.
Thank you, Tahil.
So I've been directly involved in protests and civil disobedience movements in Madrid, where I'm currently based in Spain. But I've also spoken with and collaborated with other projects and other acts of civil disobedience in other parts in Spain, and also in other cities and countries in Europe as part of the European Arab Student Union and the network of students that we have.
Amazing. And so we've all been, I think there's a commonality here that we are wanting to say something, correct? We want to communicate something, that we're not happy with what's going on. Hence our protest, our participation in this. I would like to bring to awareness to the term compassion. So at least in the Charter for Compassion, the definition of compassion that we take is, we have sympathy, which is understanding someone's pain or seeing that someone is in pain. Empathy means that I feel that pain with someone, and compassion is identifying someone in pain, feeling that pain with that person, and then taking action to eliminate that pain. And so with that in mind, what compelled you all to take part of this civil disobedience movement? And let's start with Laith, since you were last.
Sure. Well, what compelled me to take part in it? Well, besides the fact that the Palestinian genocide that's currently ongoing, and the fact that I myself am of Palestinian origin, and as is my family, I would say just the basic idea of human decency is within itself enough for anyone to want to participate in a sort of movement that would kind of protest what's happening and the lack of accountability that's being shown towards the people who are committing those acts and the people who are complicit in them and are aiding them. Not just in this case, in many other cases. For example, in Sudan, one of the things that we as the European Arab Student Union have also kind of spoken about and focused on during the last few months is also what's happening in Sudan. The current, you could also call it a genocide in Sudan, is horrible, and it doesn't get enough media coverage as other places in the world. And that felt like something we had to speak about. And I think one of the primary points that why we were so vocal and why it was more of civil disobedience than it was in terms of, let's say, speaking or just basically kind of initiating conversation. I think one of the reasons why for us it was civil disobedience with an emphasis on disobedience was because of the double standard that was starting to show after the genocide started. Because we started to see how different governments, different people, different organizations have reacted differently to, for example, let's say what's happening in Palestine and what's happening in Ukraine, in terms of the support, in terms of the rhetoric of what was being told. And I think that was one of the reasons why we as students, and for example, myself, especially as someone of Palestinian descent, the double standard that was being shown was an extremely significant part in why we had to participate in civil disobedience. You're muted, Felipe.
I just realized. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for that, Laith. And at the same time, please, if other wants to join in, what compelled you to take action? Was there a desire to participate driven because of personal emotion, or is it affecting you personally, or is this pain or anger or grief, or observing double standards? What was it that motivates you? Let's start with Maya, and then Monya, and then Celine.
Personally, for the issues that I spoke up about, the Asian American hate, and specifically gun violence, what motivated me was, I feel like, the feelings of outrage. And as you know, I feel like is a very important emotion that too often we neglect, or we, invalidate the feeling of human outrage, like Laith said, human decency. In the case of, the fact that we had lawmakers and we had a government that essentially is not serving our needs as, keeping us safe, keeping us alive, especially in the United States. So really it was those feelings of outrage and shock at seeing more children die by gun violence, more children, it was personal, as I feel like every human issue should be. It was personal. Yeah, I would say it was those feelings, and definitely compassion, obviously, but not in, not in for the case of Asian American hate. It was more our area wanted to show a display of solidarity in other areas, like for example, when there was a huge outcry of hatred towards people in the case of Asian American hate in the US especially.
Thank you. Monya?
Similar to Laith, I'm also Palestinian. So I grew up in Greece, and I grew up like being taught to be very vocal about what's been happening in Palestine for the last 75 years. So actually the first time I've ever went to a protest was a protest in solidarity with Palestine in Greece in 2021. So I think from that point onwards, after seeing how, like, I always felt like I was alone, and not many people were talking about what was going on in Palestine. And even at school, I felt like I couldn't be very vocal about the issue either. So after I went to my first protest, for the first time, I actually felt like, it's not just me that's so angry at what's happening. And there are people that stand with Palestine, and there are so many people that are non-Palestinians. I mean, there were so many Greeks that were out there protesting. So I think that feeling of like anger and like wanting to help, but knowing and also understanding that I come from a privileged place in the sense that it is the least thing that I could do as a Palestinian living outside of Palestine. So it should be, I believe, Palestinians' jobs to talk about what's going on in Palestine, especially if you live abroad. So I felt like, that was after I went to my first protest, I felt like I wasn't, it's not a hopeless case, and you can talk about it, and there are people that give you hope and inspiration that, liberation is on its way and things get better. So I never felt that before going to my first protest. So I think that's what made me kind of believe in civil disobedience more like on a personal level. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Celine, what are your thoughts? What motivated you to participate on this?
Like I said, we're all aware, and it's not a recent issue what's happening in Palestine. It's been going on for over 75 years. And I grew up in Dubai. My high school was in Dubai, and it was an international school. So at my school, we were expected to speak out about issues and what we believed in. But they would always draw the line at Palestine, and no matter what I tried to do, I had projects, which I'm primarily focused on Palestine and what was going on, and trying to bring light to it, whether that would be in English, analyzing Banksy for like English language, or different projects where we're working with the UN objectives and everything. But there would always kind of be a line of which I couldn't cross, and like certain words I couldn't use, or there was always a filter of some sort. I had to play it down in some case, or else they would get me into trouble, which didn't make sense considering like it's an international school. I should have the freedom to say what I believe in. And that also kind of fueled wanting to do more and more, and how it's just unfair that even though it is very clearly a genocide that's been going on for ages, they're still filtering what I'm saying. And that stems from a place of ethical and moral beliefs and just being educated on what's been going on for ages. And it's just rage at the idea that like I wasn't allowed to speak out about it, which is why now it's what's compelled me to do as much as I can, and avoid the consequences, I guess, later on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tahil?
Yeah, the first time I started getting involved in civil disobedience stuff was actually in 2014, where there were back-to-back things that were actually happening. First was the silent intifada that happened that summer. And that was actually the very first sort of demonstration I had ever gone to in relation to any topic. So might as well go to the most difficult one. And I went into, I went from going and wearing my, interfaith sort of coexist flag and people asking me questions to then, like an hour later, ending up in a human chain to prevent people who were pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli from physically attacking each other. And they were just jumping on top of us. So it was talk about a first-time immersive sort of experience. And then just after that was the killing of Michael Brown, which led to sort of the massive growth of the Black Lives Matter campaign. Just getting to think about sort of the nature of engaging racial justice and trying to particularly address police brutality and an unjust, judicial system in the United States that was always against the backs and the lives of Black and Brown people. And then it was looking at it from the context of the incident that took place in Ayotzinapa, Mexico, of the 43 students who were kidnapped and killed, with the inclusion of corroboration from carteles and from the government. This was, I think, a really significant time for me to realize that there is a deeper relationship between myself and other people, and that my faith traditions always inspire me, with the context of compassion telling me that none of us are free until all of us are free. So getting to really think about that very intentionally and to put that to practice at all times for all communities was kind of the way that I sort of stepped into this, more intentionally.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to also acknowledge, from our attendees, as you are typing in the chat and then also putting questions, we will have some time at the end of this webinar to answer some of those questions, and I think they're very rich. I also want to bring attention to, if any of you have participated, our viewers, if any of you have participated in a protest or in a civil disobedient act of movement, I want to bring to you to recall what you felt and how inspiring it is to hear these young voices that are participating nowadays on things that matter to them. How are they feeling? How made you feel when you participate on those? And how important it is for us to express those things. So with that in mind, I think Monya kind of gave us a little bit of that, but I would like to hear what are some of the insights that you got from this? Do you feel like a civil disobedient protest qualifies as a compassion movement? And so why don't we go with you again, Tahil? So since you were last.
Could you rephrase the question one more time?
So I would love to hear insights from your experiences, what you felt, what you learned, what you came out with after participating in any sort of protest, and then you feel like this qualifies as a compassionate movement. Like, is this fueled by compassion?
Yeah. I think going back to some of the first sort of demonstrations that I took part in, it becomes very clear that a stance of compassion is always a stance that looks for the best in others. We know that people are very emotionally driven by the issues that matter. And I don't think we should hesitate from acknowledging those emotions by affirming them and saying we understand where things mean something either very personally for you as someone who might be directly impacted, or that you are someone that is experiencing this sort of loss of life, this experience of suffering because you care for others no matter who they are, no matter where they come from. But I think what we often have to be mindful of also is those emotions, those incessant needs to be able to show up also requires us to actually, keep ourselves mutually accountable in the process. I think oftentimes what we've observed in a lot of these larger social movements, highlighting the idea that these injustices are taking place, that people are being annihilated, that their resources are being restricted. So many of these things are happening. And I just had a conversation about this a couple of days ago, where someone was like, oh, well, this issue is going on, but so many of these other issues are going on too. And I think the intent of having a compassionate stance on an issue that we've been talking about pretty consistently with everyone here, which is Palestine, is that the intent is not to take attention away from other issues. It's to actually highlight them in new ways and create a new solidarity effect that actually helps us to be more aware of the other ones too. To have a compassionate stance in this work actually means raising awareness and responsibility of how much injustice is going on, and that we can collectively do something about it by raising awareness, raising funds and resources, contacting our legislators, doing all of the collective work that's necessary to hopefully budge something. And that it's not only one issue that deserves the attention, because no one is ever saying that. It's that saying that by emphasizing one in particular that has a historical precedent, you can pay attention to the other ones more easily.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And that's so important to bring up, the intersectionality, how everything is connected. If we affect one topic, something else can affect us. Celine, what have been some of your insights from participating in civil disobedient acts?
So for me, the biggest thing that I didn't really expect is that once I got involved in all of this, the sense of unity that it brought, seeing as I'd been, like, I had so many arguments specifically about the topic of Palestine, like, for years, people who aren't educated. But going to the nationwide protests, seeing my university start its own encampment, all this, it made me feel like I wasn't alone and that people were hearing me and hearing what's going on. And with that, it gave a sense of empowerment, and it kind of did make me feel like maybe we can actually make a change. Like, as youth, we're so used to, like, the previous generation, they've set what's in stone. You're told, like, you can't change what's going to happen, and it's everything set in stone. What you're doing doesn't matter. But seeing the amount of people who are willing to partake in the civil disobedience, to do all of this together, it really does feel empowering to know that you are helping change something. You are a part of something bigger. It is really it's not just you in the end.
Absolutely. And that's beautiful. The sense of unity that comes from this is very, very powerful. And I agree with that. Maya, Monya, Laith, what are your thoughts, insights? What would you like to share with us?
I think the main thing that I learned from, meeting other people who also had that same respect and, deep care for humanity and human decency was that our emotions are not negative factors in decision making. And that, a lot of people are taught that, logic and emotions are mutually exclusive, and that, if we make a logical decision, it has to have no emotional input in it to be the most objective. But I feel like, those primary emotions, the human emotions that we feel of disgust, of solidarity, of sympathy, and of shock are really so important, and that they can unite and bring together so many people. And that they should not be discounted, that, they should not become, that those feelings of outrage should not be felt and should not become the status quo, for us to constantly be feeling that way. And it's beautiful when people recognize that.
Powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, similar to what I said earlier, that I felt very validated, because I always felt like, my feelings or the way I felt about Palestine growing up in Europe was like I was overreacting, or, I didn't feel as validated. But then when I went out to protest, I realized that, okay, like there are other people that care about this and you're not alone. And it actually encouraged more people around me and more of my friends to want to, you know, stand in solidarity with Palestine and like show up to the next protest. So I feel like a lot of people might feel very scared initially because of the consequences that come with protesting, or you know, they're not, they feel like they're in this gray area of, okay, do I go out and protest? Is it performative activism? Like a lot of people, it's a very, when you're not directly related to the issue, some people are not sure whether they should protest or not. So a lot of what was really nice was seeing a lot of people come together and start talking about the issue. And yeah, I think similar to what Maya said, it brings this sense of unity and like empathy and compassion. So I would say those are very rewarding feelings, and they truly do bring change. Like as we can see with the university encampments right now, and universities beginning to divest, I think that change like is definitely, you know, seen. So
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I think the biggest insight for me personally over the last, I would say, months, potentially longer than that, but I think the biggest insight that I've received because of everything that's happening is how different yet similar a lot of the people that are participating in those protests or those movements can be, and how close they are together. And I think that's something that's really fostered compassion between all of them. Um, One of the things I've realized over the last months, for example, is that there was a lot of people who were extremely vocal, extremely they were in solidarity, I would say, with us, and they were very helpful, very supportive during everything that was happening. And in a lot of senses, like for me personally, I would say they were extremely different from me. Maybe in the way that we grew up, in the way that we perceive certain aspects of the world, and a lot of different things. But I think that one of the things that made me realize is that we're much more alike than we think, and that we can be alike with a lot more people from other parts of the world. Um, because of just the morals and values and the human decency that we share together. One of the things that I started saying after the genocide started and after all of the war started is that I felt more connected and more similar to someone who has grown up on the other side of the world, who has lived a completely different lifestyle than me, completely different background than me, but when it came to this topic, me and him came together, or whoever it may have been, we came together on this topic. We stood side by side, and it was our values and our morals that basically brought us together to speak up. Meanwhile, someone who could have grown up just across the street from me, and we could have been more different. So I think it kind of opened my eyes to how similar we can be to someone from the other part of the world, from another life, basically, and how basically we have to look past just the basic idea of, let's say, nationality or basic identity components, and look deeper into kind of the actual character and morals of the person that we're dealing with. And once we do that, I think that's what goes back to the point that Celine was making earlier, creates the sense of unity and community between everyone that's there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you all for your insights. Those are very powerful, and I think they're very necessary for us to show and to tell other people that are either watching this live or later on in the recording, the power that comes from unity and the sense that we receive of interconnectedness between us all, and to see that our issues that we are trying to protest about are also interconnected. We are coming to the half hour at the middle of our show, which is amazing. And thank you so much for participating, for people asking questions. You know, before we keep going with these questions, I want to bring to awareness to everybody, how has civil disobedience affected your life personally at some point or another, especially during this time, 2024? In my case, I'm a Chilean immigrant. I'm gay. I have a partner that is of a different race. I live in a state that is I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is a very religious Mormon state. And I see how different movements of civil disobedience have allowed my existence to be where I'm at. when, you know, when interracial couples were now, where we're seen horribly, you know, discouraged, for immigration to be discouraged. And we see it nowadays, how immigration is being discouraged and being attacked, especially in the US. Pride Month, happy Pride Month for those to celebrate, you know, like I am here in a sense feeling privilege and safety because of movements of disobedience that other people created very, very early on, or very, very early on, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years, which is so sad to think about, right? And so, and we're seeing now how, especially nowadays, you know, with the student encampments in different colleges and universities, how we are creating sort of change. Universities are divesting. So in light of recent events at university campuses across the world, how much power and influence do you believe the youth really hold for change?
I can start.
That, like, you can start, yeah.
Thank you. Personally, I think directly and indirectly, the youth hold all of the power because I think directly, perhaps partially in terms of what they're capable of doing right now, indirectly in terms of the future and the fact that they're the ones who dictate where the future can go. And I think that's why there's such a significant focus there on the youth. The thing is, I would say the only problem is that sometimes it takes time for those protests, for those things to come to light. And I wouldn't say too late, but well, you know, better late than never. But for example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the case of the Chicago 7, who were 7 students, and not, well, students, I would say youth, not students necessarily. Most of them were youth. Most of them were youth, and they participated in the Chicago protests, and they actually organized them in order to stop the Vietnam War. And I think over time, moving into the future, we look back and we see the impact that they had and the impact that basically the culture that they've set for now. One of the things that a lot of people were saying right now after the protests erupted and the encampment started in the United States was that students have always been on the right side of history. Whether it be for the Vietnam War, which they were heavily protesting, and whether it be for the South African apartheid, which they were also heavily protesting. So I think students set the tone in terms of, I wouldn't say righteousness, but morality in a sense, because they have set the precedent. And even while it may not have been realized at the time, looking back at it now, we can adequately say that students were correct in what they were protesting. And even if it wasn't appreciated, even if they were punished for it at the time, they saw it as a responsibility and they took it upon themselves to actually change it. And I think one of the reasons that why it's so important for students, I'm just going to add something real quick here,
No,
is
please.
because I think for students and for youth, unlike other people who participate in protests, I think personally it's because they have a lot more to lose. That's why it's much more significant. Because one of the things that we've seen that a lot of people have talked about recently, about why, for example, they wouldn't participate or why they couldn't, is we're at the start of our basically careers. We're at the start of our lives in terms of the work we want to do, the plans and the goals we want to accomplish. And a lot of people would tell us that we are jeopardizing our entire lives, our entire careers, our livelihoods into the future by what we're doing. And basically, we're putting an end to ourselves before we even have the chance to start. And I think that's why it's even more important, because of that added risk, that students speak out. And I think because of that added risk, it holds much more significance in terms of whenever they do anything like that. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. Monya, you were going to add something.
Yeah, adding to what Laith said, I think students like believing that we do have the power to change and being the next generation. I think that's so super important, as opposed to, thinking that we're doomed and this is how the system is like, and the system is corrupt and everything. I think as the future and as future politicians and lawyers and whatnot, I think it's super important to go out there and protest regardless of the consequences that you might face, because while the consequences are great, as Laith mentioned, we still have a chance at life and at a chance for like second chance for education, and we still have many opportunities in front of us, whereas the protests and the people that we're protesting for do not have a second chance at life. And I think that kind of measuring those two things against each other should highlight the importance of protesting regardless of the consequences that you might face. And I think once someone understands that, then it's way easier to, you know, come to terms and like come to terms with what might happen if you go out to protest or not. So yeah, so I just think the importance kind of outweighs the consequences that you might face. And yeah, I think that if we all, you know, continue protesting, not just against this injustice, but all other injustices, a lot of change will be brought. So yeah.
Thank you, Monya. Maya, Celine, Tahil, do you have any anything you would like to add? You know, as far as like, do you feel like you're creating change with this movement?
I think for your earlier question, I would like to again agree with what everyone's saying, and I feel like we youth have all the power. Um, it's a tough position to be, you know, someone who's young and who's involved in civil disobedience because, you know, as you're growing up constantly, elders perpetuate this kind of feeling onto you that, you know, you're immature, you don't know what you want, you don't know what you're standing for, you don't know the consequences of your actions. You know, as youth, we hear these statements quite a lot. But I think it's so important to like not beat that dream, that like, you know, that optimism that we have, that, you know, that that hope that we have coming so soon, you know, that carries in from our childhoods. Like it's important for us to remember that we still see that the world can be a better place and that we can create change. And I feel like the one way we can do that is, you know, with the right combination of drive, passion, and energy from youth, and, you know, hope and optimism, and maturity and experience from elders, without, you know, any sense of judgment, at least from the elder side, because, you know, they keep warning us about systems that they themselves have perpetuated. So I feel like it's a catch-22 in that sense. It just goes around.
Absolutely. You know, Tahil, please.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. We definitely are the catalysts for change. Even though usually the older generation is the one that has to make the final decisions, we are the ones that are influencing to make this. We're the ones that are pressuring them to make these decisions. And even not just in light of recent events, but everything with environmental activism and everything Greta Thunberg did. She was extremely young. She has done more than almost any other government has for the environment. She brought light to everything. Her name is known worldwide now, based just on her stance. And I think just as the youth, we hold so much power, especially with technology nowadays. It is so much easier for us to catalyze change. Like years ago, people were still catalyzing change years ago. They didn't have access to as much technology or social media or ways to connect with each other as fast. But now, when we can leverage technology, it is so much easier to start change, to enable change, to organize, to mobilize it, to spread the message. And it's with an absolutely unprecedented speed. Like, yeah, the rate at which we can change things now is insane. I think we are definitely the forefront for change. We just have to actually put in, or like start the effort to change them.
Amazing. Thank you, Celine.
Yeah, just a couple of things that come to mind. If it wasn't clear already with all of the responses that were just made, youth definitely have the power and they don't shy away from showing it. I think it's so important that we acknowledge, you know, what comes with this power and this responsibility is challenging the fragility of power. I think many leaders, whether it's university campuses or politicians, are feeling very fragile right now because of the nature of this power dynamic. They don't know how to deal with so much mass civil disobedience. And what they use is their authority, what they use is their force to be able to try to stop it. And yet somehow they can't, which makes it even more embarrassing because they have so much more resources in comparison. So I always like to laugh at the idea that authority thinks it knows what it's doing, and clearly it doesn't. But secondly, I think the risk that comes with doing this work is something that is always centered. For each of us personally, we have so many different identities that we bring to the table when we try to show advocacy for a community that's marginalized or oppressed. But what really comes to mind also is how we're doing this for those people as well who are not able to show up. I'm thinking about my undocumented siblings who don't feel safe being able to speak up, because if they do, it risks their deportation and violence against them. I'm thinking about my queer and trans siblings who, if they put themselves in a situation of being unapologetic, they could be thrown out and could be attacked. And there's so many other communities that are impacted who are directly associated and indirectly associated with these issues. And I think what becomes more important is, for me, in my opinion, to actually call out those people who have all the power and privilege but choose to remain neutral. Those are the people that I fear the most at this point, because there's a very big group of them who are still choosing to look at this, this large swath of injustices taking place and saying, well, it happens. Well, why don't we all just get along? Oh, well, if we just focus on peace and unity as like these universal values, systems will change. That's not how this works. And time again, young people have to keep reminding you that that means you have to be unapologetic about where you stand. And if you're not going to choose to do that, then move out of the way.
Oof. And mic drop. Thank you. Wow, that's impressive. And I fully agree with all your answers. I think it's the movement and the power and the energy is all coming from the youth, and it's always come from the youth. And I think it was you, Celine, that mentioned, the access to information. And this is something that is revolutionizing movements of compassion through civil disobedience in general, is that we have access to information in the palm of our hands. I feel like in many ways, especially in these situations with social injustices that we see in our communities and around the world, a lot of the information that we are getting nowadays is from social media. I mean, I think about this movement, especially now, the student encampments in colleges and universities around the world. I think about the coverage that I see on TV versus the coverage that I see on social media, and it's quite different. There's a lot of like things that get left out, or a lot of censorship in a sense. And for us to have direct access from someone that is recording something, from opinions from people around the world, helps us again, in a sense, to achieve this unity that we're seeing when we participate in protests in general. I also want to bring the fact that the Charter for Compassion was founded by Karen Armstrong with the first thought of the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. The universal principle that we can find in almost any religious text, in almost any old civilization throughout time, as a basic principle of humanity. And so by us being inspired by the golden rule and compassion, seems that we need to stay active in civil disobedience by being motivated through compassion. So now I would love to open the floor for questions that we have from the crowd. We got plenty of questions going on, but before we get into those questions, I would like to ask each one of you, what advice can you offer to youth who have or are considering participating in civil disobedience protests? And let's go with Maya, Monya, Celine, Laith, Tahil.
At risk of sounding like a broken record, I feel like I'm just going to keep saying the exact same thing again, that we cannot, and, other youth cannot forget what we felt the first time we see something, or we saw something that makes us shocked, that makes us hurt, that makes us feel compassion and sympathy and solidarity. That those feelings of understanding, they cannot be forgotten. Like, that's what makes us human. And that allowing, if allowing desensitization or allowing things to become the status quo without really taking the full scale of these emotions and these realities is what harmful systems perpetuate their entire, their work on. And it's how they keep living. It's how they fester. So I would say, take care of yourself and do not forget what made you feel this way in the first place.
Yeah, I would say kind of recognize the privilege that you have to go out and protest and take parts in different civil disobedience movements, as opposed to those who don't have that privilege. And I don't know, grow with a friend, don't be afraid, and kind of just stand for what you believe in is right. And yeah, just not be afraid, I would say, because a lot of people might feel a bit, unsure in the beginning. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely take a friend. It'll make you feel a lot better, and educate yourself on the issues, on your rights, on what to do if anything goes wrong. Be prepared, plan ahead, and stay peaceful. And just remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. There is a reason that you're going to the civil disobedience protest.
Yeah, I agree with all the previous answers so far. I would say, just building on the idea of basically going with a friend, I would say go with a friend, but with the idea and with the goal of basically developing that sense of community once you're there with everyone that's around you, basically. The idea of it basically is to kind of share what you're feeling with everyone who's around you, as they should with you, and for all of you to kind of support each other and kind of uplift each other, instead of having that burden onto yourself. And it should feel like a safe space, and that's the mindset that you should have going into it. And yeah, I would say that's basically it from my side. Go and kind of tap into that sense of community that's there.
There, two things come to mind. First is you are not obligated to complete the work, but you are also not allowed to desist from it, which reminds us that each of us has a role to play in the moment, and that best moment is now. There's never such a thing as too late when it comes to trying to promote justice and equity in the world. And secondly, please always remember that just because oppression hasn't knocked at your door yet doesn't mean it's not ready to. I think it's very important to remember that we are all a step away from losing our rights. And we don't have to be so selfish to wait to lose our rights to then become activated. We have to be ready to do that work now so that we can ensure that people can retain their rights and that more people can actually be liberated in the process.
Thank you. Wow. Very, very powerful from all five of you. Thank you so much. I'm going to open the floor now for questions from our public. First, and with a raise of hand, has any of you received any training in nonviolent ways of being an activist? Raise of hand if you have. I see one. Yes, kind of. Okay, so that is an answer right there. Thank you so much. Next, what are your practical pathways for encouraging other youth to overcome apathy and get engaged?
I think that's one that I can comment on, since it's one we've kind of struggled with, but we've really, I would say that's something that we faced over the last few months, especially I would say myself, Monya, and Celine, with our roles in the European Arab Student Union. A lot of youth are disengaged, or they're incapable basically of participating or being a part of the civil disobedience acts that we're doing. I think the important thing to realize is that everyone has a different way of helping out, participating, being part of that civil disobedience. And I think that the best way to allow people to kind of overcome that is not to necessarily force them into one, let's say, compartment or the other, but it's more to recognize the difference that each of them have in kind of resolving or approaching those problems and encouraging them to do it. For example, not everyone could be able to go to a protest, but other people may be able to do something else besides a protest, like, for example, a fundraiser or donations at somewhere local or something online. Someone else might be able to do something like, for example, write a book or a small post that they can create for social media or something like that. All of those are incredible acts which each hold their own value, and they require, in that case, someone who is, I would say, not necessarily passionate, but kind of involved in that specific sense. I think the idea of forcing everyone into, for example, everything or one specific thing doesn't work from what we've realized, because we used to be very disappointed in a lot of different cases at the lack of turnout that we would have for a lot of different events, for a lot of things that, in our opinion, we were looking at it and we were saying this is extremely important and significant, and it was inconceivable for us that not as many people as we expected were there. But once we started to realize that we're dealing with a range of different people, and all of them have their own form of basically protesting, being an activist, helping out in different ways. Once we've realized that, and once we've started basically to encourage people to kind of do what they can in their own way to help out, I think that's basically what allowed a lot of people to overcome the laziness, let's call it, that they had, and allowed them to kind of engage more and help out more as much as they can.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else would like to add to? Oh, please, Monya.
Adding to what Laith said, I think instead of being, instead of forcing them, or instead of having such a strong reaction to seeing people, not be in support of the of whatever cause it is that you're supporting, I think what I learned from recent events is that it's important to try to understand where they're coming from and to kind of build a conversation from there to help them better understand how they can help. Because I've had many instances with friends who did not really believe in protesting and in boycotting. So I think after having like difficult conversations with these people, we reached a better level of understanding, and then those people were able to support and show up at the next protests or show their support for Palestine, even as non-Palestinians. So I think kind of understanding and having those difficult conversations that you might not want to really have is the kind of first step to allow others to actually feel like, yeah, I am contributing to change, and I'm here and I want to do this because I want to, not because a friend told me to, or I'm forced to. So yeah.
Anything anybody else would like to add to that, or should we move to another question?
I can add on quickly. It was basically the same thing, but it's not in that case. It's not the case that that friend does not want to join in. It's the fact that they don't know enough to join in. So for me, what ended up being the most successful is to start in like October, November, slowly educating them, showing them what's going on, how it like impacts people. And then months later, I received texts and they're like, I just got like, okay, so they got like, my social media just been flooded with everything that's going on in Palestine right now. I can't believe that this is happening and everyone's complicit in it and this. I want to get involved. How can I get involved? And they started getting involved with the boycott and everything. And even though it wasn't at the time where like it first started, it is just a case of you just need to educate yourselves a bit more so they can understand what's going on, and that usually helps a ton.
Thank you.
I was going to actually address some things that I'm seeing in the comments rather than a question.
Please.
Sorry, and knowing the facilitator has its privileges. One thing that I think was raised by someone from the Rahma Foundation about our experience of seeing protests blocking traffic and sit-ins being enough and effective on their own as form of civil disobedience, and are there other forms of civil disobedience? Let me put it simply by saying that if you challenge anyone's pocket, you have a tendency to have more ears on a situation. Anything that impacts economics, anything that impacts money in a capitalist system is immediately going to get attention. So just because it is the minor inconvenience of the drive somewhere, or it's the minor inconvenience of walking around a campus or something, is actually proving to be more effective than you realize. But it is not the sole thing that people can be doing. Because there's so much work that needs to be done, which is why everyone actually has to play a role in this. You have the people that are the organizers, you have the people that are the voters, you have the people that are the storytellers, you have the people who are helping behind the scenes, and you have everyone in between. Everyone is able to play a positive role in this work, and there's no way to not participate. And as someone who's actually, risked the situation of, being attacked by random people with water bottles, to German shepherds, to random weapons, to also having to stand up against police departments and even border patrol, let me tell you that it's a choice to be involved on those kinds of front lines. It's not something that we want to do for fun or for PR, but there's a reason why that there are people who have the comfort and the courage to do it. Doesn't rob them of an opportunity to still get involved and help. You can show your courage in other ways, and don't feel like you need to step away from that. And I think I need to reiterate this point about, um, it's so important that as we are highlighting, particularly this moment of getting to talk about what is happening in Rafah right now, and how it is reflecting sort of this larger conversation of 8 decades of injustice, that is only one step away from other injustices when we talk about things like money and power. The same issues that you're seeing for one community that's facing injustice are most probably very much associated with the other injustices that you're thinking about. Whether it's women's rights, whether it's the rights of protecting children, whether it's the environment, whether it's race, whether it's the LGBTQ community, I can name you 20 other categories that are always going to be issues in their own right that are totally associated with what's happening in Rafah right now. So don't think anything is disassociated. Everything has a connection, and that's even more reason why you should be involved.
Thank you, Tahil, and very, very true and very powerful. I would like to bring, so first of all, we got 2 minutes left, so I think we're gonna leave the questions for another opportunity. I think that this is telling me that we should host another panel with the same theme and topic. But Anum, can you please come into the screen so that you can tell us a little bit for a second about, for those that don't know, Anum is our global youth strategist here at the Charter for Compassion, and the responsible queen for organizing all this, thanks to her and the Student Arab Association. And then Laith has his hand up.
Thank you so much, Felipe. And I just want to take our last minute to say thank you to everybody who attended and to the wonderful engagement in the chat, and a very special and heartfelt note of gratitude to our wonderful panelists here. I know that the audience members join me really in saying that this was absolutely a powerful, empowering, and truly inspiring dialogue. And I think for me, what really called out the most to hearing everyone's wonderful comments and really authentic experiences that all of our wonderful youth panelists have shared is that this continues to reiterate the fact that compassion is a human virtue based in so much courage and so much strength, and more power to the youth for exemplifying that in everything that we are seeing today, not just the genocide that is unfolding in Palestine, but all the other important issues of justice and injustice that we continue to speak about. So on behalf of the Charter for Compassion and on behalf of the Charter for Compassion Global Youth Network, I extend my deep felt gratitude to all of our wonderful panelists here, as well as to Felipe, who himself is a very active member in the civil disobedience movements that he has participated in. So thank you so much, and thank you for all the comments in the chat. And a big shout out to the European Arab Student Union, who was our collaborator for this event. So thank you very much, and we hope that wholeheartedly agree with Felipe, by the way. I think we need to do a part 2. So thank you very much for participating.
Laith, would you like to say something before we go?
Yes, sorry, one last point. I just want to say basically kind of to everyone who is attending in the audience, also the rest of the panelists. I know there's a mix between youth and also not so youth people anymore, but I just want to say one last point that basically I would say that something that's really important for us that I think is would come from people who we would consider our mentors and our basically the people who provide this guidance is the support that they offer. For example, Professor Shane O'Connor, I'm not sure if he's still here, but Professor Shane O'Connor was a professor in the university that I'm in, and he is one of the reasons that we as students and myself personally were so empowered and so capable of continuing basically with what we were doing, and we felt safe, comfortable, and secure to kind of continue on the path that we were. And I think it's very important that we as a community help each other and support each other in that way, especially those of us who are, let's say, have more experience or of an older generation. I think offering guidance, offering support, offering comfort to the younger generation is one of the most significant things that someone can do, because it's what empowers them to continue doing what they've been doing for the past, and also to kind of reassure them that they're going down the right path, and that they have all of the security that they may need. Because going down this path that we've been speaking about for the last hour does sometimes feel very worrisome and scary for a lot of people. And having the guidance of someone to kind of walk you through it and help you feel secure is one of the most incredible things that a person can have during such a time. It's one of the most important things as well. And we were very fortunate to have Professor Shane and other people as well, who basically kind of helped us through that. And I think that us right now and in the future as well, we can all kind of be that person and be that mentor to everyone else who needs it, so that we can continue this legacy of compassion for everyone else who will get involved in the future as well. So that was just my last point, kind of a request for everyone.
Absolutely. Important to have the mentorship and support from our older generations. Thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, you'll probably see us again in another episode. Again, thank you to our beautiful panelists. Your voices are powerful. Your impact is incredible. And we can't wait to hear what is next. We'll see you soon. Bye.